ask you a question about Ukraine, because it seems that one argument for the US and NATO defending Ukraine against a Russian invasion is that if the West lets Ukraine fall to an authoritarian power, then A, what message does that send about the West's willingness to defend Taiwan? And B, just with Russia by itself, what message does it send that, oh, well, you can go ahead and, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. So now Russia's going to say, oh, well, maybe I want to take, part of Czech Republic or part of whatever other territories it decides one day it wants. And it's the same fear that I have with the Chinese Communist Party, that it'll take Taiwan and then it'll say, oh, well, maybe I want to take parts of Japan. I want to take parts of Vietnam or Indonesia, et cetera. And so, again, with Ukraine, doesn't it still make political sense to defend Ukraine against authoritarian invasion?
Look, first of all, from 2014 onwards, the land that is now under contestation has been effectively under Russian control. Effectively. Of course, you had Victoria Nuland and others. And by the way, Nuland came to India and she came back to Washington. And soon after that, it took 900 days for an Indian citizen to get a visa, when it took 3 days it takes 3 days for a Chinese citizen to get a visa. I wrote a column in Sunday Guardian based on my contacts in Washington that said Nuland was pushing for an effective denial of visa to Indians by raising the 900 days for a visa to the people of the largest democracy in the world. We have 5 million Indian Americans. If anybody was sick, if anybody had a marriage, you simply couldn't go to the US. Even today, it's hell to get a US visa. And what are we talking? And the Chinese, they walk in and get a visa. So let's be clear about this. The fact is, I don't believe, as somebody who has studied a little bit of geopolitics, who has dealt a little bit with military activities, and that Ukraine is so central to the defense of the Western world, including Poland and the other countries there. I don't believe it, frankly, but Taiwan is. Taiwan is central to the defense of the Indo-Pacific, which is today the central theater of operations. I'm sorry. I know that, I know that there are a huge number of Americans who basically believe America was a slice of land that somehow strayed to the other side of the Atlantic, but is essentially Europe. But frankly, it's no longer Europe, it's Asia. It's no longer the Atlantic, it's the Indo-Pacific. It's no longer Ukraine, it's Taiwan, tech, etc., on various things. The first island chain, I can repeat, and you know the answers very well. And it's no longer Russia, it's China. Look, as I said from, I think, about the first weeks of this particular war, and I had a lot of trolling and abuse even from friends in the West. After about 7-8 months, I think that trolling has become almost zero, and now a larger number of them are now agreeing with my point of view. I mean, the reality of the situation is, quite frankly, that there is a clear double standard here. Taiwan, give me the total of weapons you're supplying Taiwan, the type of weapons you're supplying Taiwan, the type of weapons and on what financial terms you're supplying Taiwan. With that, you're supplying to Ukraine. And tell me if Taiwan has not been aggressed into. Xi Jinping wants only one thing. He wants to be certain that the West and the Quad will not intervene militarily if he attacks Taiwan. If his intelligence people give him that feeling, he is definitely going to try and take over Taiwan, because that is the crowning glory of his stay. That is basically the justification he used inside the party to get this third term, fourth term, to be president for life, that I am going to get Taiwan. And he said that publicly. And party journals have been saying that within this term of the general secretary, Taiwan is going to be taken over again by China. Again, it never taken over. But please understand. And now what happens? You have the Boltons and everybody going there and saying, well, don't worry, we'll supply arms to you. Fine. How are you going to supply arms? From where? From Japan? From South Korea? Through ship in the Indo-Pacific? It's much more difficult to supply arms to Taiwan. And if you're doing that, do it now. Do it openly so that you can deter China. Today, if Morris Chang, who admitted that TSMC has to decouple from China, and who has invested massively in the United States, he is saying to a Taiwanese audience, don't mistake the United States. When you talk of friend shoring, Taiwan is not in the list of US friends. And what do we see? We see the South Korean president coming, lionized by the White House. We see the Philippines lionized. And what do we see in Taiwan? Nobody of consequence. Till now, Blinken hasn't gone there. Sullivan hasn't gone there. Nobody has gone there, except politicians going there to make a political point back home. Please understand one thing. We are, I mean, I was born in a village. Many of us are born in villages, but our minds are not entirely simple minded. And we are not entirely bad in mathematics and in logic and reason. So that's otherwise you wouldn't be having so many Indian CEOs there, which is why you have created this controversy over segments of Hindu society to try and kneecap, Indian CEOs in various ways. The fact is, looked at it from Asia, the reality is Joe Biden is a Europeanist. In other words, he believes America is fundamentally a European country. I have said for the last 32 years, if you check back on Google, that the Americans are a quadri-continental country. They're Asian, they're European, they're South American, they're African, and you're losing these three continents because of the belief. You're embedded in this fantasy that Europe is all that counts. And again, I repeat, mathematically, show me what you've done for Ukraine over just the last 14 months, and show me what you've done for Taiwan over 14 years, and I'll tell you why my argument is right.
So just so I make sure I understand what you're saying, the U.S. will say, oh, we have to defend Ukraine because if that falls, China will think Taiwan will fall. But if the U.S. really cared about Taiwan, it would be putting sanctions on China for constantly harassing its air defense identification zone. It would be giving Taiwan lots more weapons, not just selling and delaying some weapons from time to time. It would be, the U.S. would be making it easier for Indians to be able to come to America rather than streamlining the process for China. So what you're saying is that when you actually match up words to actual action, it doesn't sync up.
Look, Biden is openly talking of de-risking when his officials are talking about the risk in the Taiwan Straits. Now, why don't you invest? Why don't you invest heavily in Taiwan? You're asking Taiwanese companies to come to the United States. Why don't American companies go to Taiwan? How many hundreds of millions of billions of dollars are invested in communist China? And why you invest there? What are the arms that you're supplying Taiwan? May I tell you again, my point is very simple, Chris. My point is you are giving medication at cost plus markup to Taiwan and to India and to and to other Asian countries, which is which is nowhere near what is needed to confront this dragon. India, fortunately, we have our own advantage in terms of troops, in terms of mountain warfare, and most importantly, a deterrence capability in terms of nuclear weapons. So the Chinese are never going to be very adventurous with India, but they can be with Taiwan. As far as Japan is concerned, they're a screwdriver away from the atom bomb. And if, frankly, the South Koreans, I would be very surprised if there aren't some very smart South Korean scientists who are now making the South Koreans a screwdriver away from the bomb. The fact is, look at actions and look at the American treatment of a country that has systematically sought to kneecap the United States. Please go and read what I've been writing in 2020, for example, openly and saying openly that internet platforms are being weaponized by the Chinese to ensure that societal fault lines in India and the United States widen. In India, fortunately, we have banned TikTok, we have banned a lot of Chinese apps. We have moved in a way that you guys haven't moved for some odd reason. But the fact is, the reality is, they're delighted by what's happening in the United States. They are delighted by all this rift, societal rift, which is now being created in the United States by this kind of me, you, too, enemy dialogue. They're delighted by it. And may I point out, the only gainer from the Ukraine conflict, Russia Ukraine conflict, is China. The more the attention of the Western world gets drained away from Asia into Europe, into Ukraine, the better. I suspect there's a point in which, if this war lasts that point, they will feel it's safe to invade Taiwan. So please understand one thing. You are saying very clearly about what you're doing in Ukraine. What you're doing in Ukraine is making Xi Jinping very, very happy.
So there is a meeting coming up of the Quad, and it certainly sounds like there is a big rift between India and the U.S. But what about India's relationship with the other members of Quad, Australia and particularly Japan?
Look, I don't believe there's a rift between the U.S. If you define the U.S. as, frankly, may not be the top rungs, but the other rungs of the national security ladder, they are very focused on the China threat. As far as the U.S. media is concerned, we have, your platform, for example, is very focused on the China threat. The New York Times or the Washington Post would never listen to this point of view, frankly. They're a free press, a free media, so long as you act like Pravda and People's Daily and tell what you want to say. You look at the Western press on Ukraine. You look at the Western press, it's completely, absolutely, monotonously the same. And that's a free press. The other guys are just shut down. So the reality is, frankly, that the Chinese, it's a gift of God given to China, this Ukraine conflict. And as far as Putin is concerned, I believe, and like I said, I think India has had very good connects with Russia. And please look at my writings. I have argued for many years now, don't buy Russian armaments. That includes the S-400 missile. I wrote that when Donald Trump was the president. Senior officials told me, great, we are not going to buy S-400. You say you buy American, buy THAAD. Do you know what they're saying to us? They're not promising us THAAD. And THAAD, if we do get it, it'll be entirely manned by Americans. The data will only go to Americans. We won't even be joint managers of that. And very importantly, we'll have to pay through our noses for that system. About 60% more than we'll be paying the Russians. So where is the option? Of course, the second point they made, which again, frankly, at that point in time, I did not take seriously, was that there will not be sanctions on India because already the American, those who are studying China, they know without India, you cannot overcome China. And we know that without the United States' active involvement, we cannot once and for all take care of the CCP threat. We can hold it at bay. We can reverse it. After 2020, they have been reversed every time they tried to come. Doklam now, they're doing stealth diplomacy with Bhutan, and they're trying to ensure by very persuasive means, muscle or others, that Bhutan cedes territory to them, which is very important from the defense of India. Now, if that happens, we may have to move. And if we move, and immediately State Department, oh my God, you're doing something. Well, for God's sake, it's our defense, it's our territory. And let me again add, we want your intelligence. We want your help navally along with us in the Indo-Pacific. We don't want a single American soldier. We don't need American soldiers. We have roughly 36 million young people who are trained in bearing arms. And now we have an Agni scheme, an Agniveer scheme, which is going to ensure that we'll have in the next decade about 70 million young people trained to bear arms and fight in land, sea, and air. So may I say, we don't want your soldiers at all. Frankly, I had argued in 2003 that we should send troops to Kurdistan as Bush wanted it. Unfortunately, my argument was overruled by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee. He said, no, how can this be happening? But so I've been a long-time advocate of India and the United States working together. But I don't want troops in India at all. For one thing, they're horribly expensive. One thing, they're undertrained from the point of view of things. Because let me tell you frankly, there's no substitute for being on the front line of a live bullet. No military exercise, no computer simulation can prepare you for that. And that's why when the Chinese mistakenly thought they could cheat us by getting those clubs with nails, etc., and jumping at our soldiers who had no bullets with them, no guns with them, they thought they could do an easy walkover, and they found that they could not. Why? Because our soldiers face death every day at the hands of China, at the hands of the Islamists. I won't call it Pakistan, it's no longer a country, at the hands of the Sino Wahhabi alliance. We face death every day in our soldiery. And of course, we are grateful to them. We have been trained and schooled in that warfare. And the American soldiers, frankly, now they did face death. And the standard operating procedure was save American lives. I mean, if you study the SOP, you have a whole lot of Iraqi, Syrian, Libyan, Afghan lives have been lost, but save American lives at all costs. And we saw in Asia, forgive us for being not so smart, for not understanding the genius behind Biden's, August 15th, 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan, surrendering everything, Bagram Air Base, everything, surrendering $45 billion worth of weaponry to the Taliban. Forgive us for not understanding that it was a stroke of genius designed to fight China. Okay, Biden says publicly it's to concentrate on China. And then what does he do? He jumps onto Ukraine and Russia, forgets all about China. So please tell me, we read newspapers, we check what's happening, we have access to data, a lot of data. We are pretty good at that. And I mean, the messages that we are getting are the messages any normal, rational mind would get and come to the conclusions we are coming, which is, frankly, are we going to get that massive flow of weapons? There's no point in giving us the weapons when the attack already starts. And may I point out, when the Galwan attack came, we got more Russian weapons during that period and more Russian flights of weapons than American flights and American weapons. Please understand that. During the time when our army was confronting the Chinese army and both armies were losing life, the Russians were giving us weapons more, of course, at high cost, like the Americans at high cost, much more than the Americans. So tell me, I'm logical, I'm rational. Now, the point is, if you want to build an antidote, deterrence, you have to ensure that the antidote is supplied in sufficient quantities. On a personal note, my wife and I both got COVID in 2021. And fortunately for us, we had the Trump cocktail. And both of us took the Trump cocktail. We were pretty, in fact, my wife was not very, 103 temperature. I was about 101. She was not looking very good. We immediately went to the hospital, and fortunately, the Trump cocktail is available in that hospital. We both took it. In a matter of one night, we were normal. Thank God for pharmaceutical science. And I'm sure there have been more than a few Indians and other Asians who are involved in that research, Indian Americans, of course. But the fact is, we want that kind of. But you have to give weapons to us. You have to give a reassurance to us. And your reassurance has to be public. Asian populations are important in democracies like Taiwan. The Taiwanese are saying, what do these Americans and Europeans want? They want us to die like the Ukrainians. They want our country to be cut apart like the Ukrainians. It's not a very attractive prospect to a people who really have no gun culture and no real training in warfare. Let's be honest. That's not their history. That's not their civilization. That's why Chiang Kai shek rolled over them so easily in a matter of 5 or 6 days. That's what happened. So please, please, gentlemen, give me facts, give me reality. Because unfortunately, in Asia, sweet words and fantasies are lovely for nursery rhymes. But I think, certainly in my case, I'm a bit too old now to really like a nursery rhyme.